Okay, here we go. We're going to talk about solving for y. This is what you guys missed the other day, so I want to go ahead and get a video in here for you. This is also going to help you with your homework tonight if you haven't already done so. And this is something that we'll be doing all year and also into Algebra 2 and probably MMA for any of those of you guys that go to MMA. All right, let's just jump right into it. It's very similar to solving literal equations where we were solving for different variables. We just are going to continue to try to solve for y. That means we have to get y by itself. Now in this particular example first, we already have y by itself. So if we have y by itself like we do, what type of equation do we have? Hopefully you said it's y equals mx plus b, and you'd be exactly right. Putting in these things into y equals mx plus b form allows us to graph more easily our linear functions or linear equations. So that's one of the reasons why we solve for y to put it into y equals mx plus b. Plus it also allows us to find our slope and our y-intercept more easily identifiable, because if it's not in this y equals mx plus b form, then this b part right here especially is harder to find. So once we solve for y today, we're going to go ahead and graph. So let's go ahead and practice graphing first. First thing we want to do is we want to identify our m. That's our slope. What's our slope in this equation? That's right, our slope is 2/3. Okay, just look where the m is. The m is right here. Okay, what does that mean? What does 2/3 slope mean? Hopefully you already know that 2 means rise over 3, which is our run. That just tells us what direction we're going. And since it's a positive, we're going to go up. On top, since it's a positive on the bottom, we're going to go right. Okay, with our run. Then we need to identify our y-intercept, or our b. Okay, our y-intercept is -1. Again, don't forget this includes the negative sign. And then go ahead and graph that point first. You always want to start with your y-intercept, which is your initial value, right? So I'm going to go to my y-axis. Again, make sure you know your y-axis. This is our y-axis right here. Okay, make sure we understand which one's our y-axis. And then we're going to graph -1. So go down to -1 on here, and you put your point. Something like that. Okay, and then I'm going to count my rise. I'm going to go up 1, 2, that's my rise, and I'm going to run 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to put another point. So now I have 2 points. I can draw a line. If you want, if the points are really close together, then I would recommend that you I'd recommend that you do another point. So just count. What you would do is you'd count rise over run again. You'd go from this point. You'd go 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, and then you'd put another point if the points are close together. Okay. Now you have 3 points, so it's even easier to draw your line. It's a more accurate line. Okay. Not for me apparently. And there's your line right there. And again, as always, make sure you put arrows at the ends. What do the arrows indicate? That's right, it indicates infinitely. It goes on infinitely. Okay, so just out of curiosity, if I wanted to find my domain or range, I could tell you that my domain, it's what my x values. Well, what are my x values? That's all these. Well, my domain, is there a maximum? No. Is there a minimum? No. So my domain is all real numbers. And my range, look at my y values. Okay, is there a maximum? No. Is there a minimum? No. So my range is all real numbers as well. Most of the time when you have the infinite graphs like you have here with 2 ends with 2 arrows, then you're always going to pretty much have all real numbers for both domain and range. All right, let's take another look at our next example. Now in this example here we have 2 keeping the y from being by itself. So now we need to go ahead and solve for y to get into our goal is to get into y equals mx plus b form. Okay, so when I solve, the first thing I want to do, and again, we want to be in y equals mx plus b form. So the first thing I want to do is divide everything by 2. That's the thing that's keeping my y from being by itself. Okay, so this is going to cancel and give me 1y, or y equals. And remember, I can separate x over 2 and 6 over 2. So then I have x divided by 2 plus 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, now this might not look as easy as what you used to. This doesn't look quite like y equals mx plus b. You can change this to y equals, if x is on top, you would put 1 over 2x. That would be okay as well, plus 3. So now we can easily identify our slope. Okay, our slope is the number right here, of course. So our m is 1/2, which means that our rise is going to go up, not to the right. It's going to go up. Okay, 1, and then our run is going to go to the right, 2. Okay, so there's our slope, our rise and a run. And then the y-intercept, again, it's all of this value here, so it's a positive 3. I don't have to put plus 3, but I can put positive 3. And that's where I start my graph. So let's go ahead and go to 3 on our y-axis. So we're going to up 3 on the y-axis and plot our point. Okay, and then we're going to go up 1, and then we're going to go to the right, 1, 1, 2, and plot our point. Our points are pretty close together, so let's do it again. Up 1, and then over 1, 2, and then plot our point. Then we can draw our line through our 3 points. Okay, and again, as always, don't forget your arrows. To show that it's infinite. Okay. Pretty easy. Again, if you have any questions, please write those questions down and come see me in tutoring. Okay, let's look at another example. Here again, we have an x now, keeping our y from being by itself. So we want to get rid of our x first. So the very first thing that we're going to do is subtract x from both sides. Okay, I'm going to subtract x from over here. And again, I don't want to line it up underneath the 2 because I don't want to forget that the negative 2 and the x are not like terms. And since they're not like terms, we're not going to subtract them from each other. And that's a big mistake that a lot of students make. A lot of students will subtract 2 and x from each other, but you can't because they're not like terms. They don't both have x's. If they don't both have x's, you can't do that. All right, so that cancels the x out here because that's 0. That leaves you with negative y. Do not forget this negative, okay? It has to come down along with the y, okay? So negative y equals, since I cannot combine negative 2 and negative x, I need to bring down the negative 2. And then I'm going to bring down the negative x. Now, I talked about this briefly in class today. Again, we want this to look like y equals mx plus b. So here's the deal. If my x value is at the end, it doesn't really look like this, does it? So what we can do is when we bring these numbers down, this negative 2 and negative x down, we can actually bring them down in the right order. We can bring negative x down first and then negative 2 down second, as long as we don't lose the signs. We got to make sure that negative 2 stays negative 2, x stays negative, and they did. So we can do that without losing the signs. Okay? And then finally, the next thing we need to do is we don't want to finish with negative y. We have to get rid of that negative. And so what we do is we can do one of two things. Shortcut, we throw the negative to the other side. When we throw the negative to the other side, it changes all the other signs. The other thing that I've taught before is divide everything by negative 1. Okay? That's the mathematical way. When you do that, that leaves me with y over 1, which when I reduce it, it gives me y. This leaves me with x over 1. When I reduce it, it is x. And then this leaves me with 2 over 1. And when I reduce that, that is positive 2. So you can see that basically I just changed all the signs. Okay? So here's our equation right here. So we need to go ahead and identify our slope and our y-intercept so that we can graph it. So if we look here, we see that we have x value, but I need to find the slope, and the slope is not the x value. And that's another misunderstanding that a lot of students have, is they believe the slope is the x value. The slope is not the x value. The x has nothing to do with the slope. The x just tells you where the slope is. The number in front of the x is the slope. Well, we don't see a number here, right? So we have to pretend like there's an understood 1 there, right? So our slope is going to be 1. Now here's the problem. I need a rise over run, but I only have one number. So is that the rise or the run? Well, what you can do is you can convert this whole number into a fraction by sticking any number over 1, right? So any whole number can be a fraction as long as you take it and put 1 underneath. Okay? So now I have a rise of a positive 1, so it's going to go up, and a run to the right of positive 1 as well. Next thing I need to do is find my y-intercept. There it is right there. So I have b equals positive 2, and that's where I'm going to start by my graphing. So let's go ahead and graph. Go on 2 on the y-axis. Plot your point. Okay, and then I'm going to count up 1, over 1. Okay, and a real shortcut trick to this is just to go diagonally. Dot, 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 dot. You don't have to count up 1 over 1. When you have a rise of 1, you just dot, 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 dot. Right up there like a diagonal line. Okay? And then I go ahead and draw my line through all my dots. Again, remembering to put my arrows, right? For some reason, there we go. Okay? And that is that graphed. All right, now we're going to do one more example, but I want to touch a couple different things. I want to kind of preview a couple different things we haven't talked about. So let's look at our last example. If you look at our last example, we are in what we call standard form. And we will talk more about this hopefully towards the end of the year. But this standard form is AX plus BY equals C. Okay? This is a very important form that you need to know or remember because we use this quite a bit when solving systems of equations, which we'll do closer, later on, closer to Christmas, maybe right after Christmas. And then we also use systems of equations quite a bit in Algebra 2. So this is what form you're in here. AX plus BY equals C. Now there's a couple things that I want to point out that you might want to take notes on to have, is that when you're in standard form, and again, this is standard form, okay, when you're in standard form, A cannot be, so it does not equal a negative number. Okay? And also, there are no fractions. Okay, so you cannot have fractions in standard form. Okay, and I just wanted to touch base with you on that. I don't necessarily need you to memorize this or know how to get things into standard form today, but I wanted to touch base with you so that you know that ahead of time. And we'll work more on these later on about getting rid of the fractions and stuff. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and take this out of standard form and put this into slope-intercept form. Okay? First thing we need to do is get rid of this this 4x. So I've got to subtract 4x from both sides. Again, I don't want to line it up with that 6 because those don't go together. They're not like terms. These are going to cancel out, leaving me with, this whole term has to come down, right? So leaving me with negative 3y. Again, don't forget this negative there. Negative 3y equals, again, I want to go ahead and start putting it in order now, so I'm going to bring the negative 4x down first. Then I'm going to bring down the 6. When I bring down that 6, what kind of number is that 6? That's right, it's positive 6, so I'll put plus 6. Don't forget to put a sign in between the x and that 6, because a lot of students do that too. Well, it's positive, I don't need a sign, right? You need a sign if you're separating the numbers from each other. Otherwise, it becomes negative 4 times x times 6. Okay? Now I have the negative 3, keeping my y from being by itself, so I need to divide both sides by negative 3. And this time I'm just going to write it like this so we can kind of see clearly the separation. This cancels because that leaves me with 1y equals negative 4 divided by 3 doesn't reduce down, but the negatives will cancel out, leaving me with 4/3. So that's simplified. 4/3 x. Okay. Positive 6 divided by negative 3 gives me a negative 2, as long as I don't have double signage. And there's our answer. All right, so let's go ahead and graph this. Again, we want to go ahead and identify our slope. Okay, our slope is the number right in front of the x. That's going to be 4/3. 4 represents the rise in the upward direction. Okay. And then the 3, positive, is a run in the right direction. Okay. And most of the time, you're always going to run right. Okay. Most of the time. Because you'll either rise or fall depending on the negative number on top. And so you almost always run right. Okay. And then finally, our y-intercept is the number at the end. Again, don't forget that negative sign. So our y-intercept is -2. All right, so let's start by graphing that -2. So go to -2 on the y-axis, plot the point. Now we need to do our rise of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then our run of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Put a point right there. And those are pretty good far apart, so we'll go ahead and graph the line right through those 2 points. We'll call that good. Okay. All right, so there is our graph of this equation. Okay, pretty simple. And we're going to do this quite a bit, so you need to make sure that you learn this section in detail because this does come up a lot. You have standard form that's involved with this. You have system of equations that's involved with this. Guys, one thing I can't stress to you enough is to know how to solve for y and to know how to graph an equation. Those are the two probably most important things you'll do all year that'll help your grade improve. Okay, and as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to come see me in tutoring. Make sure you finish your homework. We'll grade that tomorrow. Other than that, have a good night.